Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Patty Matheny. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the East Valley SELPA in San Bernardino County. And I have with me one of our parents, and that is Katie Castrita. Katie has volunteered to have a conversation with me today and to share her story, a story about herself and her son and how this relates to ADR. So Katie, welcome.
Thank you.
Great. So let's begin by having you tell us about yourself and your son, Adam.
As Patty mentioned, my name's Katie Castrita. I'm a parent within the Redlands School District in Southern California. And I have a 14-year-old that is nonverbal, autistic, and recently lost his vision. So he's vision impaired. And I'm also the parent to a 17-year-old neurotypical. So I have a senior and a freshman this year.
Great. Thank you, Katie. And so when we met, when you joined the East Valley SELPA CAC, that was about 6 years ago or so. And a number of years prior to that, when Adam was just a little guy, around 5 years old, you pursued due process. Tell me about that experience.
Yes, Adam was right around his 5th birthday. Most autistic kids, he became a runner. He would run from the teacher, run from the aide, the aides assigned to the classroom. So he needed other services. He needed a one-on-one aide. I couldn't get what I felt my son needed, get the school district to understand that. They kept telling me, no, no, no. And I'm like, no, he needs to have this. So I went out, I hired an attorney, and the attorney, I fell for the typical line, I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Well, it ended up being all talk. So I had to let that attorney go, then hire a second attorney. And that attorney immediately looked at the file, saw all the errors the previous attorney did, and went, our only option right now is to file for due process. So we went through due process. The attorney went back and forth with the school district attorney for a couple months, and we eventually ended up in mediation. So prior to going into mediation, my attorney were having our discussion, and it was, okay, I'm doing all the talking. Don't say a word. Don't say a word. If you need something, whisper it in my ear, write it on a sticky note, but do not talk.
So you were told as a parent not to speak.
Yeah, because that was the job of the attorney. Okay. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm paying you a lot of money. Apparently you must know what you're doing. So we go into mediation, the school district's director at the time, she's long gone, but she was doing talking, their attorney was talking, the judge was talking, doing the mediation. My attorney was talking. I'm the only one not being able to say anything. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, but my voice isn't being heard. So finally I had had enough, and I was just like, I let it go. I was like, no, this is what my son needs. This is what's going on. You made all these promises, but you have you reneged on all of them. Yeah. I'm like, I have it all recorded. You reneged. So, my attorney was trying to silence me, and the judge is like, no, I want to hear from mom. So I was able to get my voice heard of what my son needed. So we went through, we got everything done, got the paperwork done. I want to say start to finish, it was probably 12 to 15 months.
Was it?
Yeah. And that was just going to mediation. That wasn't actual going through a due process, actual hearing in a courtroom.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it was very stressful. It cost a lot of money. One of the biggest misconceptions you hear from parents who tell other parents go file for due process is, oh, the school district will have to pay for everything. That's not true. It's whatever the judge decides. You're putting your fate in the hands of somebody who maybe read your kid's file once if you're lucky, or skimmed it, and then they make all the decisions.
Wow, clearly it sounds like that was a very challenging and difficult experience for you. So when you joined the East Valley CAC, you were introduced to Alternative Dispute Resolution, or ADR. And what were your initial reactions?
I looked at it and figured, after what I went through with due process several years before, anything's got to be better than that. Yeah. So, no parent should have to financially be out money to get services for their kid. They shouldn't go through the stress. They shouldn't have to fight with the school district. The teachers shouldn't be put in the middle of what they want to do for the students versus what their bosses are telling them. Right. And I figure ADR, it has to be better than due process.
So it sounds like you were open to learning more, and you did become more engaged. And so through the years since that first meeting and since those first sessions, you've become a dedicated CAC parent. And in fact, you're now the chair of the East Valley SELPA CAC.
Mhm.
And in that position, you've done other things that relate to ADR. Tell me about some of your work as the chair as it relates to ADR.
We did the state legislation day where we met originally as a group, and there were bills that are being proposed to go through the state legislation. And before it gets to the governor's desk to sign, it has to go through all these committees. So
Mhm.
before it gets to the committees, you have to get support from senators and assembly
Mhm.
people.
That's
So
right.
it was meeting with the assembly people, meeting with the senators, and their schedules are so busy. So sometimes it's meeting with their staffers. And the thing is, when you meet with the staffers, you need to make sure they understand because they got to go rely it to their boss.
That's right. And you
So
were able to tell your story,
mhm.
and you were able to share with them your personal experiences, both in due process and as you've learned about ADR.
And the first year we did it, it was smack dab in the middle of COVID.
Yes.
So I've got Adam running around the house, and I've got a senator here, and here comes Adam flying onto my lap. And I'm sitting there like,
Yeah.
well, this is either going to go really good or really bad. And
Yeah.
thankfully, that senator, she was fantastic. And she interacted with my son. She wanted to meet him, talk to him, get to know him, see, okay, these are the kind of kiddos that you're asking me to help with.
Yes. And that particular senator is one who's really been an advocate for
Mhm.
students with disabilities, and she's in our region.
Mhm.
And so we do want to give a shout out to her for the work she's done to advocate for our students and for ADR.
Yeah, I mean, just a wonderful, fantastic person.
Absolutely. And so through those efforts and through the efforts of many parents and SELPA representatives throughout the state, we have seen an increase in funds for ADR. And so as a result, the East Valley SELPA then put together an East Valley SELPA leadership team to understand more about ADR and to bring that work to the forefront. And you agreed to be a member of that leadership team and to provide that parent voice. What's that experience been like for you?
It's been amazing just to be able to go behind the scenes and see how all these projects come about, but also to know that I'm there to speak on behalf of other parents. Little details that might get missed because, as a parent, you walk the walk, you live the life. And here I'm able to say, hey, okay, hey, what about this? Or from a parent's perspective, what about this? Or, different training classes,
Yeah,
starting times, just every little thing
right.
that parents would normally think of, but, the non-parents of special ed kids may not consider.
It's
So
just not
it's,
part of their experience. So you've been able to provide that parent perspective as we've done our planning and developing things like this event.
yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's been an amazing experience.
And so, of course, as we talk about your story and as a parent of a child with a disability, the journey is forever changing.
Mhm.
And over the last 9 months or so, you've faced some new challenges.
Yeah.
What have those been like for you?
It's been stressful. It's been hard. It started out in December. My son Adam, all of a sudden, I've noticed he's walking around the house trying to feel with his hands.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing, buddy? First couple times I thought he was just playing, like mimicking one of the kids in the class that has vision issues. Then I realized, wait a minute, this is becoming more and more consistent. So we take him to an eye doctor. Unfortunately, with his disability, that eye doctor wasn't able to quite help him. However, he did write the referrals we needed to go to Loma Linda. So we get to see one of the specialists at Loma Linda, and she ends up doing a comprehensive eye exam. And due to his disability, had to be under anesthesia at the hospital. So Adam was a rock star, no problem. The staff at Loma Linda was great with him. And they were able to pull a prescription. However, nothing was wrong with his eyes.
Yeah.
So we're still not at any answers. So she orders an MRI. We have the MRI about a month later. And then she calls me back. She's like, I'm seeing some inflammation, the eye doctor. And so I'm going to refer you to the neurologist, ophthalmologist, and we'll get an appointment. I'm like,
Wow.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a couple days later, I get a call at 7 a.m. I'm in the shower trying to get kids ready. All of a sudden, my older daughter comes in. My cell phone comes up over the shower. She's like, Mom, one of Adam's doctors on the phone. My heart just dropped. It's 7 a.m. I look at the number. It's a cell phone. I'm like, okay, a doctor would not be calling before hours from a personal cell phone unless something was bad.
Right.
And that's when he told me he thought my son had brain cancer.
Mm.
So, get to Loma Linda Children's Hospital ASAP. He needs to be admitted. So I tell my daughter, hey, check in with your teachers. You're staying home. Call my husband on the way down to Loma Linda. Let him know what's going on. So we get to Loma Linda, COVID protocols are still in effect, one parent only. So I just told my husband, just stay at work. You'll have to sit in the parking lot. So you might as well just stay at work.
Right.
So they bring us back in. I'm explaining to one of the residents what's going on. And he comes back and he's like, okay, I'm just not seeing what you're saying. He's like, I'm seeing the inflammation and you have an appointment. And I'm like, please, this neurologist would not call me at 7 a.m. from his personal cell phone. Find the on-call neurologist. So he goes and calls it. Lucky for us, it was Dr. Shu. Adam's seen him before. And he's the one who actually diagnosed Adam with autism many years ago.
Right.
He happened to know the neurologist that had called me, picks up the phone, asked him, hey, buddy, what's going on? And explained. And so the attending comes in from the ER, you're being admitted. He's all, you are going to have a bunch of doctors coming in. It's probably going to be about an hour before we can get you a room. I'm like, it's okay. He's all, but in the meanwhile, if you end up with like 8 to 10 doctors in here, everybody wants to find out what's going on. Okay, no problem. So we started meeting doctors from all different fields, rheumatology, ophthalmology, neurology. I mean, it got so many different fields. I mean, we even had infectious disease. So we get admitted, they start doing tests. The first test they did was a lumbar spine to test for cancer. And it did come back negative. Right. Yay. Yay. So, but there was still this cyst that they found on his brain. So they went ahead, had the neurology surgeon remove that. That all came back negative for cancer. Yay. And so, a bunch of blood tests were going on. We finally, after 14 days, several MRIs and tests, we get discharged and he's on a high dose of steroids. And, we're just checking in with rheumatology, hoping the inflammation goes down. Still, meanwhile, all these blood tests have come back. It's not panning out to figuring out what it is. Yeah. Nobody's ever seen this before. So, Loma Linda's working hard, trying to figure out what's going on. We had an MRI about a week ago, and, we're waiting for the results. But from what I can see on it, it looks like there's a decrease. And, all the doctors before we even left the hospital, their nurses were calling moving up appointments. So I'm like, okay, you guys obviously fast track the results of this MRI if you've already gotten it. And, so we're dealing with Adam's vision loss on top of the autism.
Before you go on, I really have to emphasize that we got to live this journey together for a while, and you were such a heroic mom. Yes, Adam was in the hospital going through all these tests with all these specialists, and you were by his side 24/7. And that part of the journey as a mom, is incredible. And not everyone can appreciate what you went through. I think it's also important to point out during that time, you participated with the ADR leadership team to give your views of what we should be doing, and you did so virtually. You have always embraced helping others and just are such a tremendous person, Katie. And we really appreciate that part of you and knowing that part of you. But your story continues because Adam did come home.
Yep,
and
Adam
school
came home.
Continues, right?
School continued. So we had Adam's IEP was originally scheduled for April, right in the middle of his hospital stay. So we ended up postponing it. The IEP team decided that would be in everybody's best interest. It originally got scheduled 2 weeks before school got out, which everybody knows that's like probably the worst time to have it because everybody's schedules are so chaotic. His teacher had gone out on medical leave. So they were scrounging around trying to find a teacher who could sit in. So I was able, luckily, to get his teacher that he's going to have in high school this year to come step in. And she ended up just rewriting the whole IEP to fit her class, which, is nice because he's going to her.
Yeah.
So then I had found out that the vision assessment I had put in for February still hadn't been turned in. And I'm just like, wait a minute, you guys, we spoke in April. You were supposed to turn it in then. Now it's the end of May. What is going on? Mm-hmm. And it just kind of turned into this finger pointing game until finally the admin of the IEP is like, give it to me now, I will turn it in. So I'm like, thank you so much. So it got turned in. And then the IEP it fell apart from there. I had speech wanting to take away services. I had psychology that couldn't do the report for whatever reason she was giving me. And it was a cluster. Mm-hmm. And I ended up leaving that IEP feeling like, okay, now I remember why I had to file due process last time. You guys couldn't do your job. So I had reached out to you, Patty, who, thank you, had put me in contact with the director of our school district. Miss Buckmiller, and she had called me and we had discussed what had happened, and she apologized and she helped get everything back on track, which was great because everything was so far off track. And then we had just talked about things that like went on, things that are working, not working. And then after I'd hung up with her, I started thinking about, okay, how my due process was, and then how this, being on the leadership team, asking for help in ADR, how the situation, this one was so much better. Here it was not even 7 days after the IEP, we were able to resolve what was going on. Where in the other situation, we were 12 to 15 months.
Right.
And, the one thing that the director, Ms. Buckmiller, had told me, she's all, you ever need anything, call me, email me. So I got that olive branch. We're coming out of due process. It was, oh, go call your attorney.
Wow.
And it just, to me, it was like, okay, if this is how ADR works, this is a much better situation. There was no stress. Granted, I was upset over how the IEP went, but you know what? That's how most IEPs are anyways. Somebody's not going to be happy. However, it got solved. I was, everything got handled. I was happy at the end. And I was left feeling that we still have a relationship together at the school district, where it wasn't left me versus them versus me, or my kid's going to be stuck in the middle, or is someone going to retaliate against my kid because I went and got an attorney? I mean, you get all these feelings.
Sure.
Where this one, it was a nice phone call. I explained, she was very receiving, very nice, helpful. And we were able to solve the issue and get, everything back on track for my kid and what was in his best interest.
Great. Thank you for sharing your personal experience with ADR. Not that you ever expected to in your leadership role, but you had this experience and you have had it to contrast with your due process experience. And from my perspective, it's important to note that any parent can call to the SELPA. We have a procedure for that, and explain their situation, and the SELPA will help get the appropriate ADR intervention. And for example, in your case, it was me reaching out to the director to work on that relationship with you and understand what was going on. In some cases, that isn't what happens. In some cases, it's actually the SELPA staff working directly with the school staff to reach out and work with the parent, or even suggesting a meeting where someone from the SELPA or someone from our East Valley SELPA ADR cadre helps to facilitate a meeting. There are many different ways to do this thing we call ADR, and a lot of the steps that we've put into place are dispute prevention. And so when things don't go well in an IEP, and like we learned in yours, it did not, we get training to those IEP teams to prevent these kinds of things happening. And so there's many, many facets of ADR, but the bottom line that we wanted to share today, and you've done so eloquently, is the parent perspective of how that works. And how, in your case, a simple phone call and building that relationship with the special ed director and the staff in your district is helping to resolve the differences where that wasn't the case under a previous manner that you engaged in trying to resolve conflict.
Yeah,
So,
I just and looking back at both situations, this current one using the ADR is so much easier. I mean, you don't have the stress, you don't have the emotional drain, you don't have the financial strain. I mean, most people don't realize when you go to retain an attorney for due process, they're going to want $5,000 to $10,000 for a retainer.
wow.
And then when that money's gone, they ask for more money and more money. I mean, at the end of the day, I think our due process ended up costing us around 30 grand.
My goodness.
Well, here with the due process or the ADR, it didn't cost us anything.
It was free.
It was free. And
it was fast.
It was fast, extremely fast. I mean, 7 days compared to 12 to 15 months.
Yeah.
And you're left knowing that you still have this relationship intact with your school district where you can pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Whereas before with due process, you don't know if you pick up the phone. I mean, during my due process, I would call down to our special services and they'd be like, oh, sorry, call your attorney. We can't talk to you. You have an attorney.
Wow.
However, here, the olive branch was extended out. Call me by the director. Call if you need anything, call, email, let somebody know, let us handle it. So you have that olive branch, you have that relationship intact.
Those are those unquantifiable results, if you will. And you talked about the ones that were quantifiable. It saves you a lot of money and time. But truly the piece of building that relationship long-term with the educators who are with your son all day long, right? You want that relationship to be strong because we all have the same vested interest. We want your child and all children to have a good school experience and have their needs met, their unique needs met. And ADR provides us with an opportunity for that to not only to begin and develop, but to grow. And Katie, your story from start to end, and though it hasn't ended, I know we'll continue to work together at least until Adam is 22 and hopefully beyond, is a great example, and not one that we ever thought we would have to share just a year ago.
No, not at all. And one thing I also like to point out to parents that is if you go ADR, it does not take away your right to file due process. If ADR completely falls apart, you still have that right. And that's what I tell parents when they ask me about it, because a lot of people would be like, oh, I know you went through it. I want your attorney's name. And I'm like, you know what, hold on, let's take a couple steps back. Let's go look at ADR. Let's call the SELPA. Let's see if there's other ways to do this, because a lot of parents don't realize attorneys are extremely expensive and they're time consuming. The courts are still backloaded from COVID. There are so many other factors. And so that's why I tell them, try ADR. It'll be quicker. It's free, it'll be less stressful. And if for some reason it doesn't work, you can still file for due process.
Right. And you make some good points, and a couple that I will add to. It's totally voluntary. Totally voluntary. And both parties, the school and the parent. It's not a requirement to begin this whole ADR work that we do, but it has such important benefits. And also, though you've shared your story, so much of what happens in ADR in respect to coming to an agreement is confidential. So it's not something that has to be shared. We just have to get to the point of resolution and the specifics around that.
And I mean, for me, the handful of parents that I've referred that originally came to me asking for the attorney, wanting to file due process, they've called the SELPA, they've gone through ADR, they were able to get their problem solved. Or at least come to some kind of a compromise that when they realize, okay, this is what's in my kiddo's best interest.
And that's exactly what we're all working together towards. Excellent. Are there any final thoughts you have before I thank you profusely for your time and sharing with us?
And not at all. Thank you for having me, though.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. You know, it's clear you speak from the heart and that you embrace everything that we value in a parent. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.